Hey, Chandler Bolt here, and joining me today is Merideth Tullous. Meredith is an award-winning children's book author of her book, A Gift to Remember. She's also a self-publishing school student. And so in this interview, we're going to talk about, hopefully you've already checked out the interview with Marcy, one of our children's book coaches here at Self-Publishing School. If you haven't, check out that interview either on the podcast or on the YouTube channel. That's kind of the X's and O's of writing and publishing a great children's book. In this interview, I want to talk about kind of from a student experience and as someone who went through the process, like kind of break down a case study. How did she do it? What did she learn? What were the toughest parts? She's won awards already. The book hasn't even been out a few months and she's already won awards. Also from an educator perspective. So I know there's a lot of teachers, educators that have recently just kind of been interested in writing children's books. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And you're in for a treat. So Meredith, super great to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so let's dive in. So first and foremost, how'd you find or hear about us at Self-Publishing School?
Well, I had begun to have the idea that I wanted to write a book, and I think I just saw an ad or one of those things, and it was very intriguing.
Yeah.
So of course, I went and tried to do research and everything like that, and read as much as I could. And ultimately, I found an acquaintance, and she was a student at SPS.
Oh, no way. This is
Yes.
someone that you knew in real life.
Yes, in real life.
No way. Nice.
Yes,
Yeah.
and she is a very successful author with SPS as well.
Cool.
And she had wonderful things to say about the program. So it was then and there that I picked up the phone and made that call and wanted to learn more about it.
Yeah. And who was your friend?
Miranda Davis.
Okay.
She's the author of Christian Girl in the Yoga World. And
yeah. Awesome. Yeah. I love Miranda. She's so inspiring.
Yeah.
And just I know she was in our PR program, and yeah, that's awesome. So she mentioned, so you were thinking about writing a book at the same time, randomly one of your friends was like, oh, I did this through Self-Publishing School. And so then did you watch the training with Marcy or did you just go straight to booking a call with the team, or what did that process look like?
I watched a training and then I just thought, I want to talk to somebody over there. I want to, learn more, and I had questions. And so after I watched the training and got a little more information, that's when I picked up the phone and talked to an awesome person there. And
do you remember who it was?
Oh gosh, it may have been Dylan, maybe.
Yeah, Dylan. Yeah, nice.
Cool. I have lots of questions, so bless him.
Yeah, of course. That's awesome. And so guys, I'll talk about this in a little bit. We got a brand new training and a brand new entire children's book course. I'll give you the link to that at the end of this episode. It's coming up pretty much immediately after this episode airs. So check that out. So, all right. So you joined the program. What was I want to go why, and then I want to get into like X's and O's.
Sure.
Let's start teaching and kind of hear your experience. So, what was the tipping point for you? Why did you say, hey, this is something that I need to do, and like I'm going to go through the process. I'm going to work with Self-Publishing School, all that good stuff.
So my book was inspired by my son. It was his letter to Santa Claus. And it was that moment. I've always wanted to write. And I think a lot of writers will say that. I've always wanted to do this. And it was just that moment that I thought, okay, this is it. This is what I want to do. But I want to do it with excellence. If I'm from a background of ballet, and it's something that we train and train and train to be as excellent as possible. And I thought I need someone that has gone before me to help me through that process, show me what steps maybe I'm not aware or even exist. And so that was why I ultimately thought, okay, I've gotten I was decently far along in the process, but I thought, I really don't know what I'm doing ultimately. Yeah. And I wanted that guidance and that education, to try to produce something that was, good quality.
100%. And I think that's every person listening or watching that wants to write a children's books. It's that, right? It's not just, okay, how do I publish something, but how do I publish something of substance and of quality that I'm going to be proud of, that like this is part of my legacy almost, like long after you're off the surface. I say this about my books too, but like that book's still there and are still here, and it's quality. So where were you at in the process when you joined? You said you'd already actually made a decent amount of progress.
Yeah, so I had completed the manuscript. I just all came out, like it does. And then I actually had already tried to research illustrators and found one that I really, really was drawn to. And then that's when to me it started getting real, and like you're saying, that legacy, like I wanted to show my son that his unselfish letter and his kindness can make waves, but I wanted to do it in a quality way. And like you're saying, any children's author realizes like this is going to be a part of a family, not only the children, but the parents too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is such an honor. And you just, you want to produce a great book.
That's great. So you got the manuscript done. You joined self-publishing school, and you start going through the process. Like, what were the beginning stages of that process like? So you wrote the manuscript already. How many words was it actually?
It was a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think at that point it was probably about 800.
Okay.
And I
Okay.
knew that it needed to be shorter. The industry
Hmm.
standard is typically 700 or less. But
Yeah.
funny story, it's written in rhyme and in a
Hmm.
poetic fashion, and
Hmm.
typically that's like the first, like you have to really uh not everyone should just go out and rhyme.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh no.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
um
was that one of the first things that your coach talked to you about, is like, hey, this is kind of a difficult way to do this.
yes. And
Yeah.
so then I knew it needed to be cut down, even more. So then it really just started, like you're saying, the X's and the O's, like, okay, what do I need to start with first? This is what I've done, and I'm happy if it's not right to just backtrack and start over, because they're, like I said, people who've done this, they have so much wisdom to impart, and it's okay if you have to go back a few steps.
Yeah.
Then I got into, a real editing phase and using an editor and going through that process first.
Nice. And so how did you edit it down, and what would your tips be for anyone else? Because I mean, I know you were like, it's a lot. I had to go from 800 to 700 or 750, which is kind of the sweet spot for the type of book that you have. I know a lot of other people who start and they're like, oh, I've got like 1,500 words or 2,000 words. Like, so how did you trim it down? And any tips for folks who maybe have just written way too much and need to trim it down?
Yes, absolutely. And funny, don't feel bad if you're that person, because I'm working on a second book already and it was close to 2000. So
That's why you're laughing.
yeah, so there you go. So for me, one of the huge points I remember during the going through the program was, think about what the illustrator is doing as well. Is he or she also telling a part of the story? And to me, that was
Ah,
pivotal.
nice.
Um,
Yeah.
for example, Johnny is holding a ball. Maybe I wrote that, but yet the illustration is showing that. Well, then I can just cross that out. And so that was huge for me, is the artwork um, helping me tell the story. So I started whittling that down, and that made a huge impact for me. And then with children's works, you realize the weight of each word that you write, because you can't write a lot. So every word, is it important? What is it saying? And then especially once you get into rhyme, the cadence and the way it flows and the rhythm and reading it out loud. And so going through all that. But for me, one of the points of the course, which was huge, was, think of the whole picture of what is
Ah,
the illustrator saying? What are you saying? So if you see the condensed manuscript, there's a
mhm.
whole bunch of the story over in the illustrator notes.
Right.
So
That's great. That's great. And is there anything that you're doing differently with book number two? Obviously, you've got a bigger gap to close from 2,000 words. Like, anything else that you're doing, or any tips for others who are in that exact spot and they're like, okay, I get that, but I still have way too many words. Like, any other tips on how to condense it down but still not lose the story or the narrative?
Um, I feel I love detail. So I like adjectives. So for me, it was literally going line for line and taking breaks. Maybe I'll go through one page or 2 pages of lines and really think, okay, do I need 3 adjectives to describe what I'm saying in one sentence? No, and then taking a break and stepping away and then coming back, because that just, it changes your perspective and you're like, oh yeah, no, I don't need that. So for me, and this one was actually a bit more challenging, the second book, because it's not written in rhyme. And so perhaps that's a bit more challenging for me personally. And so I really had to, go through more of that process of just taking a step back and then revisiting it.
That's great. Now, what if we're well, and actually, just a sidebar here. I remember, I think this is Jerry Seinfeld quote about that he would spend an hour trying to figure out how to remove one word from a joke. And
Wow.
just kind of the whole, I mean, it's the Abraham Lincoln, if I would have had more time, I would have wrote a shorter letter kind of
Yes.
philosophy, right? Of like, but from a, I think, from a jokes perspective, probably similar to a children's book perspective and theme of like, less words, same impact, or less
Mhm.
words, greater impact, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And I think that's why for Jerry Seinfeld, he's saying, oh, if I can remove one word, like it's quicker to the punchline, it's a simpler joke, and
Mhm.
it's more likely to get a laugh.
Yes.
And so just kind of that philosophy, and which I think definitely applies here. I'd love to move forward. So, so you manuscript, editing, you mentioned Illustrator. How do you find a good illustrator? And then any tips or lessons that you learned from the illustration process that might be helpful for others?
Yeah. So I had, like I said, I had kind of just gone on out on my own before I joined SPS, just searching. I went on different, you know, Upwork and Fiverr and, all of those things. I happened to stumble upon the illustrator that helped with my book. But then when I joined SPS, I thought, I mean, the resources are just amazing. They're countless. And to have a referral is huge, because that means someone has used them, and you can
Yeah,
trust that.
for sure.
But I was very fortunate, because I did find him and struck up a conversation, and it worked out, luckily, and he's brilliant. Uh, but I think it's so comforting if you're a student with SPS to go through what they call you guys call the Rolodex, and be able to look at all the suggestions and see if something catches your eye, or matches what you're looking for. So I look forward to utilizing that also in the
Yeah,
future.
nice. And then any tips, like if you look at the process, were there any pieces that if you said, okay, Meredith, knowing what you know now, the person who's listening to this or watching this, who's about to embark on that illustrator journey, like any tips to save time, save money, simplify the process?
Yeah, so I think really having a very direct conversation at first of how does that artist work? They all work so differently. Asking how much detail do you want? How much direction do you want from me as the author? For example, I asked in the second book I'm doing with the same illustrator. I just said, okay, now that we've gone through this and sort of hashed it out, in the first book, what do you want me to do different in the second book? What would make your life easier? And
That's great.
so
That's a great question.
I think asking how much information they want, but then on the other side of the coin, respecting their artistic process as well,
Yeah.
because I can be very, um,
Like
you
type
know,
A.
ducks in a row,
Yeah.
but then to watch someone take what I wrote and turn it into something so much greater than I could have ever lined
Hmm.
out,
Yeah.
So I would say in both, the communication, I would say, is just vital, and appreciation, because what they're pouring into the pages is amazing, just like what you pour as an author
Yeah.
into the pages.
Yeah. Awesome. That's fantastic. And so, so you go through the illustration process, and then go through the formatting process, and then you're ready to publish. What was the publishing process like? And Or actually, yeah, what was the publishing process like? And I want to circle back and talk about marketing separately, but
Okay.
any lessons learned or key takeaways, again, for that person who's kind of Meredith pre-SPS or pre-book number one, that like any lessons learned from that publishing piece?
Yeah. So when you're ready to get there, it is so amazing and so terrifying at the same time. I don't know if you went through that with your first
Oh,
book.
for sure. Yeah, definitely.
Um, so I think what was so amazing was to have the SPS community. There's a huge community within the school and the training school, and having people behind you and enjoying the process, and then really following the lessons. And because if you do that, you're going to have all your ducks in a row. And you can feel comfortable that when you're about to click those buttons to say publish and go through that process, that it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And
It's
I
less
remember in my
terrifying,
house,
isn't it?
oh, it's
You're,
so
yeah,
terrible.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I had my boys and my husband around me, and then they all just screamed, and it was the coolest moment. But behind that were so many wonderful people, family and friends, yes, but SPS members that were ready in the wings, waiting to support the book and support its mission and its message. And that's huge. And it's very comforting too.
Yeah, that's amazing. And what a moment with your family. I mean, that's what it's all about. That's super
Yeah.
cool. So what was kind of speaking of that, what was the most rewarding part of the process for you?
Hmm. I think the most rewarding was when I finally looked at my older son, who was the one who wrote the letter, and I just said, one little letter, I said it could change someone's lives. And he just matter of fact looks at me and just goes, "Well, yeah, I hope so." And I was like, and there you have it.
That is awesome.
So I
That's
think
so
for
great.
me, just watching that, and like you say, I know you said this a couple of times, the legacy behind a children's book is,
Yeah.
and behind any book, frankly, but I think that's probably the most rewarding part. And then learning, I have so enjoyed the education
Yeah.
behind what I've learned at
Yeah.
SPS. I would have never been able to produce such a book book like this that
Yeah.
without it, really.
That's so great. And I think that there's two big lessons there, right? Which is it's, we say this all the time. It's not about the book. It's about who you become in the process, and like all the life skills and things that you learn, and all kinds of things, whether it's project management, communication, time management, writing skills, like just across the board. But then also like you mentioned, I mean, just the power of children's books to shape the future of our generation and I mean, I think it's just such an important thing that just shapes the lives of kids and helps teach such impactful lessons. I think we can all think about those things in our childhood, right? Like for me, it was the Giving Tree. Like that
Oh
was
yeah.
like the book that I remember that growing up, I wanted to read it all the time, and just so many life lessons and things I learned along the way from that book. Hey, I want to go flip side. What was the toughest part of the whole process? The hardest part for you?
I think, I well, I'm a pretty open book. Like I formatting, because I tried to do it myself, and that was a
Yeah.
horrible mistake.
So tell me about that. Did
So
you end up hiring someone? You just you struggled through the process? Like what was
I
that like?
I did, and I should have listened to the course, but I didn't. And because I was, I tried to save a few bucks, and which, everyone is guilty of that. So I thought the illustrator had done so much formatting. I was very fortunate that I thought, oh, well, I mean, I'm a smart person. I can figure this out. And it just did not, I was trying to hash through it, and then it didn't translate right. And I had the specs wrong. And I thought, okay, lesson learned. And then I went out and found a formatter to help correct and finish, correct what I
Nice.
had done, and then, help me finish it out. And so I would say that was kind of the toughest moment, because
Yeah.
it is a Christmas book. I wanted to have it out The original plan was July, kind of a Christmas in July, to sort of build its foundation. That was the principle behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Also, in turn, the world turned a little bit upside down during sort of the end parts of finishing out the book.
Yeah.
So, but I still wanted to bring that bright light into the world. So
Right.
I was like, okay, enough. I need to go get a professional formatter, and
Good for you. Good for you. I mean, that's a good lesson learned for everyone. It's hire a professional.
yeah.
And it might cost a little bit more, but if you factor in your time, you'll
Oh,
actually probably save money.
I saved a lot of money.
Oh
And then
man,
I
that's
think,
great.
I think the other tough thing is I think especially like as a debut author or anyone listening, you're going to always you're going to have those moments where you're like, is it good enough? Is it, am I representing
Yes.
myself well? Am I representing SPS because I'm a student there? And,
Mm-hmm.
am I doing this well enough? And you're going to wrestle with that, but, you know, you don't ever want to let it stop you, because ultimately you are going to create something great.
Mm-hmm.
But we are all going to wrestle and have those moments of doubt. So those went in there a little bit,
Mm-hmm. How'd you wrestle through that? And any tips for folks on if when not I guess honestly not if but when they hit that moment, like how to push through that?
I think the ultimate question you have to ask yourself is, do you believe in the book? And if you believe in it, then parents and children are going to believe in it. And I think if you just remember that, and that there's a reason you're writing this book, even if it's something, even if it's a silly book that's designed to make children laugh and it doesn't have, a big, huge message behind it. Like, laughter is super important. And um, if you remember the weight that it will carry and how it will benefit children, then you just say, okay, I just kept telling, like, my husband and my friends and my family, I'm like, one step at a time. Like, don't try to think way ahead, way down the line, just one step at a time. And when that doubt creeps up, you just remember why you're doing it and where your heart is, and then just take that next step.
That's fantastic. I love that. I love that and totally agree with that kind of one step at a time mentality. So you alluded to this a second ago, and I was already going to ask about this. So I'm curious to learn more. Is publishing like a Christmas book in June, July? Like, what was the thought process behind that, and why publish it? Because I think this connects to a question that we get all the time: is should I change my publishing date based on X, Y, Z? Based on COVID, based on before the holidays, after the holidays, before Thanksgiving, after Thanksgiving. Here, there's this, election days on a Tuesday. Should I not do that? Like, should I publish it? Like, kind of almost altering the publish date based on what's going on or holidays or things like that. So what was your thought process behind that, and why publish in June, July, or whatever that range was that you published?
Sure. No, that's a great point. And I definitely see how, everyone can kind of waver on, should I change my plan? My original thought, well, I really believe so. In my career, I've built a lot of programming for ballet and free programming and sustainable programming within communities. And the thing I've learned the most in the business side is you have to build a good foundation. If you don't have that, it's just not going to work. It's going to topple. And for me, the idea was, well, if I can release this in Christmas, Christmas in July, then I have time to build the foundation. I have time to build awareness of the book. I have time to see if people review it and like it, and have that, so that when we hit what we're about to hit, which is the holidays, it has a foundation behind it, rather than me trying to just jump in when so many other authors are producing incredible Christmas books, that I've built a foundation for the book to usher it into the holiday.
It's
Um,
great.
yeah, so I really, and then moving forward, just I kind of have that mentality in any of the things I'm doing as an author or a writer or a speaker, is what's the foundation? What's holding my message up? Um, and then of course I am just like everybody else, and was like, well, do I change this? Because at that time the pandemic was, well, still is, but we were in the pandemic. And actually my husband is a frontline nurse as well. So my house was interesting. And, uh, and
Wow.
I had the same question as should I stop? Should I just press the pause button and stop? And the answer was just no. Like no, because even though it seemed chaotic and whatever, I also think that there's a reason that people want to do it when they want to do it. And sometimes that can equal opportunity as well. And that's how I looked at it, is what's the opportunity here? Yes, it's kind of an odd time, but at that point, then my whole goal was, well, you know what? This is joy and happiness and
Yes.
beautiful book. And why not? Why not in June and July?
That's so great. And great tips and takeaways. So let's see, you published the book in June, July, and I love the thought process behind building film. I love two things. A, the focus on foundations and building foundations. And we totally see eye to eye on that. And then secondly, is like taking a long view to the book promotion, and not just, I think the mistake that I see a lot of people make is like, launch week or launch month, I'm going to go all in. I'm talking about the book, all that. And then as soon as that's done, I'm done with that, and I'm moving on to the next book, or I'm moving on to the next project.
Mm-hmm.
And just the importance of just really continuing to promote the book, and continuing to do podcast interviews, to do Amazon ads, to do promotions, like all the things that we teach and talk about beyond the book, so that it truly is beyond just a launch. And I think that's super important. So you publish in June, July. What did you do to market the book? What's worked the best so far? Like, what sold books? And I mean, you've got some good momentum with reviews. Like, what's working from a marketing perspective, and where's your focus from a marketing perspective?
So, the reviews certainly were super helpful to get the book, off and running. And SPS has great, they help you understand that whole process and why those reviews are important, and how to go about talking to people about your book and asking them to review it. And so that was sort of the initial, just let's get some reviews. Let's see kind of what people think about it in all honesty. And that would help me as an author prepare for talking about it in podcasts in the future, to see people's perspectives right up, out of the gate. And then, the chances, number one, it was summer, so most schools weren't in session. And then number two, with, coronavirus, it's changed a little bit, sort of the school visiting, author visiting. So I thought I need to have, kind of a different plan for a little while. And so I said, I really want to get my name out there and promote the book, but I want to do so to also have more writing opportunities. And so I started inquiring and just started doing guest articles. And when they found out I had a book, they were like, yes, please write an article. And it just sort of snowballed. And and that way people can see me and hear about me, and then they learn about my book, and sort of a different way of marketing. And I know SPS and you are a huge proponent. Sometimes you just have to ask, and that's literally what I did. Hey, I saw your great magazine, and would you be interested in an article? And it went from there. And then now I became like a regular contributor. I've been asked to become a regular contributor. And and then podcasts, so much is virtual and online now. And that's been a huge tool for me, just to be able to have conversations that maybe I would have gotten to have in schools and in community centers and things, because I think conversations, especially in children's books, are really, really important.
For sure. For sure. Yeah.
So that's kind of been my marketing strategy. It's going to change a little bit now that the holidays are here, with more ads and things like that. That was kind of the initial strategies.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so guest posts and magazines and podcast interviews and stuff like that. How do you even find who to reach out to, and how'd you reach out to the first one and get your first yes?
Yeah, another terrifying moment.
It's so funny. My girlfriend she's publishing her book within the next month. And so she started doing the first reach outs. It's a children's book. And she started doing the first reach outs to podcasts. And she's like, this is terrifying. She's like, I love the writing, but this is stressing me out. So it sounds like, yeah. How'd you, I guess the questions I just asked about, how'd you find who to reach out to and get your first yes?
Yeah. So I think also you have to figure out your strengths and your weaknesses as a person. Maybe you really love the writing, but yet maybe you're not so thrilled about the marketing part of it, or maybe you're vice versa. Or maybe you're like, okay, maybe. So I think figuring first out what your goals are and kind of what you're good at or not good at, but then kind of using that map of just starting kind of where you're from, just start locally. I think that is super important. Local cities care about their authors. So I think starting, on a local and community level, that's kind of where I started. And I was terrified. And in your first podcast, and I've spoken to countless news people and in my career, but there was just something about a podcast, and so just marching forward from the community and local perspectives, and getting a draft of what you want to say, and trying to make it as concise as possible. And SPS is really, again, great at just sort of helping you start to take those steps one at a time. So while you want to say, oh, I'm going to be, I want to be on Oprah, or, all those things in time, just, start at the local level and then
first step,
grow.
That's great. That's awesome. And yes, I think I think the difference, I love that you touched on, hey, I've done this in my career, but I think it feels different when you're talking about a thing that you created. Mm-hmm. Right? It's like if you're on the news or on a podcast or speaking, and you're speaking about a different business, a school, a thing, an organization, it's like, oh, I'm representing this thing. But when you go from representing this thing to representing yourself and representing the thing that you created, I feel like for most people in their head, it gets way scarier, because I think in some way it feels more vulnerable.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point. Yeah.
So I love this, getting guest articles and podcast interviews and stuff like that. Any super practical tips on, like, because I think sometimes people hear advice like this and they're like, okay, great, but like, how do I get the first one? So like, what did you do? Did you just email them? Did you know someone? Did you call them? Like, what was even like the super practical, like, okay, and then I got my first guest post or magazine contribution or podcast?
Yeah. So I think it's important first to identify sort of your genre of children's work. So what message is it telling? And then who might be that, audience, whether it's, if it's a STEM book, and science-based and fun stories about science and agriculture and space, or if it's about, something emotional, or if it's about, a faith-based book, first identifying what more of the audience that would be easily, receive that really well. And then, I am guilty of just looking at my phone being like, okay, who are my friends, and do they know anybody? Because your friends are willing to help. It's amazing. And reaching out to them and then thinking, okay, well, let's see, maybe the planetarium might be interested. They have a magazine, or,
cool.
Things like that. And then literally, yes, just trying to find, an email and crafting an email and just hit send. It's okay if it's not perfect. Just hit send and you'll be shocked at what happens. I was.
And it sounds like some of the first wins came from two things: reaching out to friends and saying, hey, who do you know? Or could you help me with this? And then also just hitting send.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's great. Let's shift gears. Well, I want to ask you one more marketing question, kind of looking forward. And then, I think a couple more questions. So looking forward, obviously this is a seasonal holiday-based book. What are you doing to focus promotion leading up to and around the holidays? Like anything you're doing from like an intentional marketing perspective or podcasts or promotions or ads or anything like that?
Mm-hmm. So again, going back to June, July, like not a whole lot of people want to talk about Christmas then, they're just not ready. And I get it. It's okay. Even though I want to put my tree up, it's okay. So I knew intentionally lots of marketing needed to hit basically right now. We're about to hit November 1st. So everyone kind of starts to have that shift into the holiday season. So again, laying that foundation of, am I a credible author? Am I someone that they're going to take seriously? And some of that guest writing and articles help, okay, yeah, she has a book. Oh, and she's writing for magazines. And so building that foundation, knowing that, a little bit more intense marketing needed to happen at this time. So yes, so now I have booked podcasts. I'm a couple of magazines have picked up the book. So like about 3 magazines are about to hit all right in that November date.
Nice. That's
Um,
great.
yeah, and then really watching. It was just mind blowing this when A Gift to Remember was published and it hit #1 new release in like 5 categories. Like it was just the most amazing thing ever. And SPS was so pivotal for that to happen and all the processes, and not only how to do it, but understanding how all of this works. And because of that, my question was, okay, I hit that, but then how do I maintain that going into November? If type in certain searches, for example, on Amazon, where is my book falling, and can I keep
That's
it
great.
within a
Yeah.
decent range? So I'm on page 1 or 2 or 3 and not page 95.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, so intensifying the marketing, learning
It's
about
great.
ads,
SEO.
as your courses teach, and
Yeah.
just pushing more now.
So what's an example of 1 or 2 phrases that you care about or have looked at and said, hey, I'd love to show up at the top of search for this thing?
So one of the genres, my book does have a faith-based undertone. So I wanted to show up under Christian Christmas books for children.
Oh, cool. Great.
There's incredible books, just marvelous authors. And but that was one that, again, kind of identifying my audience. But then on the flip side, my book is quite unique in the fact it's Santa Claus, but yet also a faith-based book. So I also knew I had a different market as well.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
In working 'Twas the Night Before Christmas and Christmas rhyming books and Christmas traditional books, things of that like you and I probably grew up reading, and those traditional Christmas books. So, kind of going after those keywords or key phrases that I feel like parents search at Christmas time.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so it's a good takeaway for everyone. What are people searching for? How do you get your book to rank for those keywords? And think about, if you are the audience, think about what are the things I would search to buy a book for my kid? And then, okay, now how do I get my book to rank for that? And there's a lot of things we talk about and teach on Amazon SEO. And there's a great episode on the podcast with Dave Chesson. Check that one out. That's a really good one. So one quick follow-up, and then I want to just do a briefly touch on the award you won with the book. So, but quick, actually not follow-up question, but more a follow-up point is, so one thing, Meredith, and I think this just speaks to grassroots marketing, which I'm a huge fan of, is you sent me a copy of your book and a little ornament and a note. And that is so important. And it's something that I always believe in, just going analog when everyone's digital. And I've sent thank you notes and gifts for years and years and years. It was a year I did a thank you card every single day for 365 days in a row. And just the things that came out of that were crazy. And so I think that's important, because even fast forward to now, I went to Marcy, our children's book coach, or one of our children's book coaches at SPS. And I said, hey, I want to interview one of our children's book authors. Like, who do you recommend? And there were a few names, and I was like, oh, Meredith, she's the one who sent me that book. Let's bring her on. And like, and so like that in a lot of ways is the difference, and just standing out. And so I think that's so important, a really great takeaway, and just something that you've done well, and I really appreciate. So
no, that's such a great point. I think it's, and I would encourage, any person any author who ends up writing a children's book, and if you are sending it to someone, whether it's a reviewer or to Chandler Bolt or to, anybody, try to make it personal, because, it goes a long way. Just as the members of your team who helped you get to this point, your editor and your illustrator and your formatter, and realizing and showing appreciation and just being very detailed, because it makes them feel special. It makes them feel like really you didn't just slap a book in an envelope,
Absolutely. Yeah. Hey, last question. You won an award with your book. How did that come about? I mean, award-winning children's book author, that's got a ring to it.
So weird.
How did that happen? Any tips for folks on finding places to submit, or did you submit for it? Did it just happen? Like, any tips for other folks who would say, yes, I want to submit my book to win an award after I publish? Like, what would that process look like?
Yeah. So, just going through the courses and talking with other authors, you realize that there are awards out there. And so I just started kind of looking into them, and what are they looking for? What are the categories? And so I just began to submit, and that was actually the first one I submitted for. And it ended up coming back, and I thought, whoa. So I would say just, really talk to other authors in the community. Who did they apply to? And then I realized, with awards like this, if in fact you do win one, then they go out and start talking about your book, and that's amazing. And I think also parents have a tendency to really navigate towards awards, because they're like, oh, there can be a trust level there. So I think it ultimately can help. But, just go through, the award website, line for line, read it all, and then submit. And you don't ever know what's going to happen. And so I did end up submitting for others, and they'll tell you when they are going to award. And so, it can be a few months. So we'll see what else happens.
That's awesome. How many did you submit for?
I think I submitted for 3 total.
Okay. Wow. And 1 out of 3 ain't bad. That's awesome. 3 ain't bad. Yeah. Holy cow. All right. Well, maybe you should submit to some more. That sounds like a good use of your time.
Yeah.
Last question. Knowing what you know now, Meredith, I mean, as someone who's went through the entire process, you're working on your second book. Like, what would be your parting tip or piece of advice for the other Merediths out there who are about to embark on this journey? And yeah, just kind of knowing what you know now.
I think the first thing is to take that step. If you're thinking about writing, and if it's something that you've wanted to do, I can't imagine my life now without saying I did a book. Like, it's something so I think the first thing is to just take that step. For me, that was the bridge. That was the bridge from a dream to a reality that's a beautiful dream. And so I'd say that's the first tip. And then the second is enjoy the process. And especially if you get to be a member of SPS and have that foundation behind you and the community behind you, and you go lesson by lesson and line for line, don't forget to enjoy the process. That's something I've loved is, of course I stressed a little, let's be real. I mean, but having those beautiful moments and enjoying, and then, and enjoying it with everyone around you. And then you'll find yourself wanting to do more books. And then you've learned awesome. So much,
Yeah. It's all about the journey and who you're becoming in the process, yes. Which is amazing. This has been fantastic, guys. I'm going to circle back in just a minute, kind of final words from Meredith. But before I do, 2 resources. So Meredith just mentioned taking the first step. So we've got 2 resources right now. So as of the time of this webinar being, or sorry, not webinar, this podcast being released, next week from publication date, we've got a live training with one of our children's book coaches, Marcy Pusey, all about how to write and publish a high quality children's book that parents love to buy and kids love to read. Okay, so that's gonna be amazing training. You can register for that training. Go to self-publishingschool.com/kids. Okay, kids with an S, self-publishingschool.com/kids with an S. And you can register for that webinar there. If you're watching this after the live training has already happened, no problem. Go to that same exact link and we'll link to a recorded version of that training that you can watch. So you can still watch that training. And then secondly, if you said, hey, I've heard enough, I just want to work with you guys. You can go to self-publishingschool.com/children. Okay, that's self-publishingschool.com/children. You can book a call with my team at Self Publishing School. They can chat through your goals with your book, your challenges with your book, your next steps, and whether or not it's a fit to work with us and that sort of thing. I know that Meredith mentioned kind of at the top of this interview that was, you're poking around, had a friend that did it and said, all right, I just need to talk to someone. And then that kickstarted this whole journey. So that could be the kickstart of the journey for you. And exciting announcement. So we've got a brand new children's book program that we're releasing. Very, very exciting. We've been working hard behind the scenes on this for months now, and it's going to be releasing in tandem with this live webinar. So if you want to be one of the first students to join the brand new program, you can book a call with the team, self-publishingschool.com/children, or show up to the webinar, learn, and we'll talk about an enrollment opportunity there. In case you missed it, this is kind of exciting. The first 100 members of the new children's book program are funding a library through the Fund a Library organization. You can find out more about that. We've already funded one library. Our goal is to fund one more at least, and then keep funding libraries. So you could be a founding member and be part of funding a library in Africa, which is super exciting. So, and our hope is at some point we'll have actually SPS students books in some of those libraries, which would just be really, really cool. So register for the webinar if you're interested in that, or join the program. Be one of the founding members, self-publishingschool.com/children. You can book a call with the team there. Meredith, this has been awesome. So helpful. And I really think people are going to get a lot out of this. It's one thing to hear from someone who coaches the process. And I think it's another thing to hear from someone who just went through the process. And so I think this is going to be really helpful for folks. Where can people go to find out more about you? And more importantly, I mean, get your book. Where can they go to do that?
So they can visit meredithtulous.com and you can learn about me and my likes, my favorite color, totally really appropriate things that you want to know. And through there's a link to buy the book there, or you can go on to Amazon and, I have it in all the different formats. So hardcover, paperback, ebook, whatever you enjoy, it's available there.
Awesome. A gift to remember. Check it out. Grab a copy of Meredith's book. Meredith, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.